You're listening to Faithful Friends, our new interfaith podcast where a rabbi and a Catholic deacon sit down to talk about life, faith, and the places where our stories intersect.
We're not here to debate. We're here to explore, to ask questions, maybe even laugh a little along the way. I'm Anthony Cullen, a Catholic deacon, theology nerd, and teacher of the faith.
And I'm Rabbi Chaim Edelstein, lover of Torah, tradition, and a good cup of coffee.
Welcome back to Faithful Friends. It's the new year. Rabbi and I are sitting together today talking about prayer, talking about the Psalms and the Liturgy of the Hours from the Catholic side and its origins from the early church as we borrowed from your side, and how the early Christians were Jewish and praying at different times of the day as we hear in Scripture, going back to the Psalms of David when he says in Psalm 119, at least in our numbering, 7 times a day I praise you, O Lord, kind of justifying the time of the day and sanctifying the day, making it holy. And we're going to talk about those Jewish roots, the early church, how it kind of developed over the years, the centuries, how the rosary ties into this whole thing. Many Christians certainly understand where that's coming from, and then why it really matters to us today. So, Rabbi, since you come first, why don't you give us a little bit from your ends of older Jewish prayer and how it's evolved into what is going on today? We can kind of balance that out. I know the temple is a lot to do with this, and kind of like the post-Babylonian exile, and kind of like that's what we see when we talk about church history. We kind of start off on that end, how things started to evolve.
Yeah. I was just in Israel, and I was at the Kotel, the Western Wall, and of course a very big center for prayer. Of course, many faiths. Of course, you have a mosque on top where the temple used to be now. You have the Kotel. You have many people praying all the time. But I think that the moment more people were praying on the plane when we hit some really bad turbulence than possibly when I was at the Kotel. So always interesting to see where you think these things will end up. We're thinking about prayer and structures and 7 times a day. Wow. Do you guys pray 7 times a day?
There are options for us to get up to 7 times a day, 8 if you include going to Mass. Unless you live in a monastery, that's not going to work. Recently, we had the feast day celebrating French saint, St. Francis de Sales, and he puts out in a book that saying that essentially to stay in your lane. If you're a married man, you can't pray like a monk. If you're a bishop, you're not praying like someone else in a different state of life. You have a role in your life. A public bishop is not the same as the parish priest, not the same as the monk, the married man, the cloistered nun, the nun who teaches, the woman, the boy, the girl. Everyone is a little different, and we strive for perfection, but we also need to know what our state of life is.
Perfection looks different for different people.
It does.
Also, right?
It does. And we all strive to be like God, but we're obviously not God, right?
Right. So I think that if you broke everything up, there might be 5 times a day for Jewish prayer. You could get there. I know in Islam it's 5 times a day as well. So there seems to be something about coming back to these things multiple times a day. Mm-hmm. Of course, most often what you hear from the Jewish tradition is 3 times a day, kind of our sweet spot. We'll get into, I'm sure, the content of what we're saying at all those times. But as you said, of course, it does probably go back to the temple, although there's a debate in the Talmud, as there always is, over why we have these 3 different times a day, with one opinion being that there's one time for each patriarch, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, because it says that Abraham got up early in the morning. So, well, why else would you get up early in the morning if not to pray? So he's getting up early, he's saying his prayers. It says that Yitzchak, or Isaac, went out in the afternoon to possibly to meditate in the field. And they say, well, what else is meditation if not prayer? And then it says that Jacob, laid down at night. Well, everyone knows you can't lay down at night if you're not didn't say your prayers first. So the 3 times, maybe have some connection to the patriarchs. But then, of course, the next rabbis come in and say, what are we talking about? This is because the temple had very clearly defined times for sacrifices. There was one in the morning, there's one in the afternoon, and there's one in the evening. To which, of course, the redactor comes in and says, this is not two different things. Why do you think the temple had 3 different times for sacrifices? So it tries to kind of connect them all together. No, they're both right. The sacrifices too, those were based on the patriarchs. And of course, I had a teacher in Jerusalem who said that, of course, when Abraham got up early in the morning to pray, he used the good old Sim Shalom Siddur, what most of the conservative synagogues today use, because Abraham was a righteous Jew, and so what other book could he possibly use except for the one that we use? His little tongue-in-cheek explanation.
So
there.
Abraham was more of a morning person.
I mean, it says he got up early in the morning to go to the mountain with Isaac.
Okay, right.
Okay, but the important thing is he was using the conservative movement's Siddur. That's how you know it's the right Siddur, because even Abraham was using it. So those are our main times. One is morning, or if you want to be really committed, dawn would be the kind of the earliest time. But morning, the first third of the day. That's the morning service, shacharit, and then.
But it has to happen after sunrise, or at least the sun is coming out.
You can begin slightly before sunrise, but by the time you say the Shema prayer, then the sun has to be up. The technical definition of when it's early enough is that one should be able to recognize someone that they know, if they're familiar with, a friend, so to speak. You should be able to recognize them from 4 cubits. So that's
Would
roughly...
you translate that into metric, right?
Yeah, it's 18 and a half inches per cubit. So it's, 2 arms lengths. So think like if you held your arm out and somebody else held their arm out and your fingers were just touching, could you recognize them? The other possible way to know is on the tzitzit, on the corner tassel of the prayer shawl. Traditionally, there was a blue thread. The exact color is sort of a greenish blue kind of. And they said, well, if you can distinguish that from the white threads, then you can pray. So, we're not talking about distinguishing black from white. It's more like a light blue from white. And there's a certain time in the morning where they kind of look the same. But once you can tell, that's the one that's different, that's fine. You're good to go. And then that goes until, roughly... depending on the time of year, let's say 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, something like that. And then you get the mincha time, which is afternoon. So it has to be after midday, but, kind of before sunset is starting. So that's the afternoon time. And then Ma'ariv, or the evening prayer, has to be after sunset. You are also supposed to repeat some of these prayers right before you go to bed. So if you do that, then that's how you get 4. Right,
okay.
Because now you've added right before you go to bed. And there's also a number of things you're supposed to say in bed before you get up. In that case, maybe there's 5 times.
So these prayers, though, can you do them alone, or do they have to be in a community setting? Because with us, it really can go either way.
If you don't have a minyan, which is for us 10 Jewish people, in a more Orthodox setting, 10 Jewish men who are above the age of bar bat mitzvah, so like over 13 and they're Jewish by us, you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have to have a community in order to do everything. So things like reading from the Torah scroll, the prayer mourners say, the Kaddish. There are other Kaddishes as well, not just for the people who are mourning, but any of the Kaddishes, certain editions that have what's called the Kedusha, which are extra little sections that are added here and there. So if you're by yourself, you skip all of those things. One of our very significant prayers, the Amidah or the Shemona Esrei, is repeated out loud if you have a community, 10 people. And if you don't, everyone says it kind of softly and you move on. So it's both, but it's definitely preferable to have a community. In fact, again, there's a section of the Talmud that's talking about these things and says, okay, like how far out of your way are you required to go in order to pray with a minyan?
I remember a couple of years ago, I was coming out of a Rite Aid. I stopped off on some work travel, whatever, and these 2 obviously very Orthodox Jewish. Probably a dad and his son asked me if I was Jewish. I guess they saw the beard and they assumed. Obviously I wasn't. I couldn't help them. I apologized. But they were looking for a minyan, but there was two of them. It's like, guys, you have a long way to go. And this is not a Jewish neighborhood.
Well,
so
they may have been trying to find a few people to bring back. Often in Jerusalem, you walk around. We used to get so sidetracked. We'd be like, oh, we'll meet you at such and such a place and we'll all go to lunch together. And on the way there, you'd get stopped by somebody. Oh, like, hey, we need someone for a minyan. And I remember one time I was with a friend of mine. We were walking past this place and it was the Persian rite. So it was like very different than what we were used to. And he goes, oh, hey, help make our minyan. And we were like, like how many people do you need? You know, like if you need like 3, like we're going to keep going. But he goes, we need 2. Like, there's 2 of us. Like he needs 2 people. Like you have to go, right? You have to go help him out. So we went and we were so completely lost the entire time. And then we had a hard time finding where we were supposed to go to lunch afterwards. But, you get great stories out of it.
Sure. My kind of great story with that, when I was first introduced to it, I was on summer camp staff. I had just turned 18, so I was officially an adult. And there was a Jewish patrol. This was up at 10 Mile River. And somehow I became the assistant scoutmaster for the Jewish patrols at this training thing. The rabbi would call the boys over. They would go off to a separate spot. And I would actually pray the Liturgy of the Hours in the back and be done significantly sooner than they were because I was praying alone. And it was kind of fascinating to me. To see the dedication of a bunch of teenagers, and they weren't forced to go, but most of them went on a reasonable basis, depending on their family background, obviously. Yeah, and look at this. Years later, we found someone mutual on Instagram that I knew, and it's like, how the heck do you know this guy? And I knew him when he was like 12, and we reconnected years ago, but we're all much older. And
you were able to do your service at the same time as them. You've mentioned before that before your ordination, you maybe did a lot of these things out of personal piety, you might say, right? It was meaningful for you, and so you were doing these things. But now you had mentioned that because you were ordained, now you've sort of vowed to do these things. Is that right?
Correct.
Now you have to do them. So we have, of course, a strong sense of obligation, for these. Of course, different people have a different understanding of what it means to be obligated in these things. Definitely in the Jewish tradition, prayer is seen as a service. It's called avodat shebalev, the service of the heart. It's seen as, we're fulfilling the role that the sacrifices fulfilled in the temple. There's no temple, but we can still sort of do the sacrifices. And the sacrifices weren't really optional. Like that, this is not something that we just, if you want to, you do it. You kind of have to do it, whether you want to or not. Ultimately, I think what makes it meaningful is that you do it because it's worth doing, whether you want to or not.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So for you, it's how does that all tie in? And
I was first introduced to it in high school, freshman year. The priest who was teaching our religion class showed us his breviary, which is what the book is called, for the Liturgy of the Hours, and it kind of fascinated me. But he said one particular thing: even if you're praying alone, you're praying with the community. The Pope in Rome, you as a 15-year-old sitting in that high school class, 14, whatever it was, himself as a priest, however he was, 30, 40 years old at the time, we're all praying the same thing at the same time, even with time zone changes. And someone is always praying the Liturgy of the Hours throughout the day. And that's how we're sanctifying the day. And that kind of struck me. Even at home, I'm literally praying with the Bishop of Rome. We're praying the exact same thing. It might be a slightly different translation, but it's the exact same thing. My priest, my lay people who live down the block who might be praying it, and now it's just so much more accessible because I can just download an app and it's free. The books are a little expensive for what they are, and they're finally coming out with a new translation, so all the liturgy geeks are kind of geeking out over this. It's been a while. And everyone is kind of debating, like, do we buy the books or not? Because 9 out of 10 of us use a phone now.
New books.
That's the thing. I'm a kind of a book nerd. I bought my house for the books and bookcases. It's like I'm probably going to buy them, but like right now...
You're having a sore spot for the conservative movement because we've been waiting for a new weekday Siddur for about 5 years or something.
Stop.
And it's finally gone to print. It was like pre-order. The first shipment is like on the way over.
5 years?
So we've been waiting.
Stop.
Well, you have to understand that the one before that was from the mid-90s, but that for us, there are actually significant differences. I know that Second Vatican changed a number of things. Okay, so imagine that like something like that happened, but then they waited 30 years to publish a new book that like had the changes they wanted to make. So we've been waiting for a little while for like the updated language, you know?
I know we're kind of jumping around. So the Second Vatican Council, we're talking about the 1960s. It was officially only in Latin prior to that time. We get a new edition of the Liturgy of the Hours in, we'll call it around 1972. It's a rush job.
That's a pretty quick turnaround. That's
it was
actually
too quick.
That's yeah. I mean that's
It's
surprising.
a really
wow.
poor translation. There was some bad translations of scripture. Some people have more arguments than others. These other random things were added to it that most of us omit at this point after the Psalms, but some people, there's all these weird stories on it. So we're talking 1972. We've been hearing about a new translation since then.
Since 1972, they don't have the new one out
Around
yet?
2000, Pope John Paul II asked the church communities to redo their translations to get it more faithful to the original Latin text because a lot of liberties were taken. The Missal, the one we use for Mass, was finally retranslated in 2011. We're finally getting the new Liturgy of the Hours now.
It has been
A little bit.
a
A
little while.
Yeah.
Huh? Okay. But they didn't say it was coming out in 1972.
Yes. There was a supplement put out in the early 90s.
They said, "Oh, it's coming out soon." It's coming out soon.
Right.
And then it was like 60 years, and they still haven't done it.
Think about the amount of new saints
I mean,
since
guess,
1970.
I guess in the long arc of the church's history,
It's very small.
60 years is like not that much. I mean, come on.
I mean, we're
you know,
still 500 years
you know.
behind on a lot of other things, but yeah, we're finally getting to that. Funny enough, about 2010, I found this blog. Another liturgy geek, married woman who's super into all this, found an edition from Kenya. I ordered it because I was curious. A month and a half later, this weird package showed up at my house. My wife was like, "What in the world is this?" It was a bizarrely wrapped package, and I was like, "Oh, that's my Kenyan breviary," because there is an English translation. ISIL, the International Commission on English Liturgy, translated it for them. It was rumored that's what the U.S. was going to do. This is all unofficial stuff, and I'm sure somebody could contradict me if they were that much of a nerd as well. I am willing to bet it is a very similar translation we're getting this year. Because the Psalm translation was changed. It's not the same one. And it's funny enough, the one we use for the Liturgy of the Hours, that all clergy are required to pray, is a different scripture translation that we use in the Mass. So personally, when I have to read something at Mass, and it's something that we read every day in the Liturgy of the Hours, it throws me off because it's not the same translation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
We take a long time.
That's taking a while. I don't feel so bad now.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we should commend then the Publications Committee for such a quick turnaround.
So
it is,
twice a year,
4 or 5 years, we're getting a new book. This is apparently unprecedented.
Yeah, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has a biannual meeting, and every time the meeting ends, we all wait for the new edition to come out, and they piece together, the hymns were finally approved, or there was the Gray Book edition, and then went to this book, and then Rome approved it, it came back, and there was a couple communities on Facebook that would follow this, and nothing happened this time, we'll wait till November, we'll wait till June, let's see what happens now, and it finally happened.
What do you actually say 3 times a day? Because for us, the morning service is the longest one, and it has the most in it. The afternoon is the shortest, okay? And then the evening is a little bit in between. Let me say the core of our liturgy is a prayer called the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is
the Lord
our
is our God, the Lord alone.
The God is one.
That only shows up once a week for us, but we have the option to repeat it every day at night.
Okay, so we also say that at night. But we have the line, and then we have 3 paragraphs that come after it.
Now, could you do the whole thing from memory?
No, I'm not that good.
Okay. Okay.
What I find is I do big chunks of it from...
Yeah, so can I.
I kind of sometimes I'll zone out from the book and I'm just sort of reciting things. The problem is there are some things they'll start off the same and then they end differently.
Okay.
So you'll start saying the right one because they all begin with the same 5 words. And then you end up saying the wrong thing after that one. I had a teacher who basically said, even if you have it memorized, you should always read it from the book.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So if you always are going to read it from the book anyways, why bother memorizing it? But the thing is, you say stuff enough, you kind of start to memorize it anyhow. Things like the Ve'ahavta paragraph, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. Like that one in Hebrew, like it's in there, like it's memorized. Then there's a much longer paragraph, V'haya im shemoa tishma'u, and it shall be that if you punctiliously observe these things, I suppose. And then the Vayomer paragraph, which is about the tzitzit. And then we have the Amidah, or the Shemona Esrei. It's called the Amidah because you're supposed to stand up when you say it. It's called the Shemona Esrei because there are 18 blessings, although there are actually 19 blessings in it. That is a series of short blessings that are said in a particular order, etc. And for holidays, there's little insertions and things like that, whatever. And then those are couched within psalms and, later little prayers for things.
So you have additional, not all scripture in this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the
So
Shemona Esrei is like, there will be a line that comes from
there's a flavor from somewhere.
But it's most of it comes from the Talmud. But the earliest Siddur means like the order, okay? But also means like the book of the order, so to speak. So it's funny because we kind of use the same terms for these things.
yeah.
The earliest Siddur I think we have is like the 900s, like Rav Amron Gaon, I believe it is, or Sadia Gaon. They're like the two earliest ones. They're from like the 900s, the earliest ones that we have anyways. Then there are these very formulaic blessings that are added before this and after that, and a lot of psalm snippets here and there. And in the morning, you say the last 5 psalms. There's a whole like service of psalms, and then you end it with the last 5 psalms. Because if you read the last 5, it's kind of like you read the whole thing, So,
Oh wow, that's cutting corners a little bit.
there were
Yeah.
these guys who used to apparently do the whole 150, and they said, you know what, that's kind of a lot. Let's only do the last 5. And it's like if you do the last 5, it's sort of like you read them all. You read the end of the book, like you kind of read the whole thing, right? You know what happens. You read the whole things.
All right. So the early Desert Fathers, we're talking about like, Anthony the Abbot, like 200-300s, even earlier than that. Memorizing all 150 Psalms was part of their routine, and they would try to pray that every day. Then it got to do it in a week. St. Benedict comes around, and he codifies the whole thing in what's called the Rule of St. Benedict. It later develops over and over. It kind of changes. It gets chopped up over the centuries, on and off. Now, early, European cities were developed around monasteries. So it was kind of like development of early civilization. And like in Europe, everything's becoming civilized. People wanted to pray with the monks, but they couldn't afford the books. I mean, even monasteries had these enormous books that multiple guys could go around. And this is where actually our rosary comes from. The rosary would be traditionally 150 Hail Marys, which are based on, the Gospel of Luke to reflect on the life of Christ. And it would keep them in sort of unison with the monks who were praying 7 times a day, and they would hear the bell tower because they're around the monastery. 150 Psalms, that kind of makes sense. It does get kind of chopped up and abused over the years, on and off. The order reforms itself over and over again. We can go into that whole thing, history, whatever. But that rosary, becomes very close to it. And the rosary is what most Catholics know as, well, this is our prayer. This is the prayer of the church. But funny enough, I ask this to my class every time this comes up when we talk about the rosary. I ask them, what is the official prayer of the church? And they're like, oh, the Our Father, the Nicene Creed, like all this whole litany of things. And, well, there's only 2, and it's the Mass and the Liturgy of the Hours are the only prayers that have an actual requirement to it. All Catholics supposed to go to Mass, every Sunday and Holy Day of Obligation, and religious are required to pray the Liturgy of the Hours. And you had mentioned the book is referred to as the Order. Well, the book that controls the Mass and the Liturgy of the Hours is called the Ordo, O-R-D-O. And that controls our day. It tells us, today we're recording on the 28th of January. It's the feast of, St. Thomas Aquinas. It's white vestments for Mass. It's the common of doctors of the church, which also comes in the common of pastors. The readings, the whole 9 yards, it's all in this little snippet in the Ordo to guide the Mass and the Liturgy of the Hours, the 2 prayers of the church. Because they're the ones that are constantly being prayed throughout every time of the day to sanctify it.
So then the Liturgy and the Hours, what's the core content of that?
So the way the current edition works and the one that will be published in the next couple of months will work, it's a 4-week Psalter. Maybe. It should. So the pre-orders start. But the funny thing I forgot to mention, there's 2 different publishers publishing it. So places like seminaries and monastic houses and everything need to establish which book are we buying. Because people are going to come in now with 2 different books, with 2 different page numbers. It's like, why couldn't we just have one? It's another story. But
some people want red and some people want blue.
The page numbers don't match. This doesn't make any sense. But the USCCB stopped publishing a couple of years ago. I got some really good books on sale, which was fantastic. Should have bought more. But yeah, we don't have a centralized publishing house, which is going to make a whole other level of confusion. Again, just use the app. Because the book is so confusing if this is not your thing. Because liturgy means work of the people, and the liturgy of the hours makes you work. Because it is a constant amount of flipping. There are some days it takes 5 different ribbons to get through morning prayer.
We have that off on like some of the holidays, but a lot of places or a lot of people, some people bring their own book. So on Pesach, Passover, you're flipping this way, flipping that way, whatever. Well, so publishers have created, here's the book for Pesach. And if you just get the one for Pesach, then you just turn the page and there's the right thing. So
this
individuals will do that
Yeah.
more, but for a shul to do that, so where are we going to put those 500 books? And if we have to do that 3 or 4 times a year and get 3 or 4 different books, where are we going to put all those books? So you can get by with flipping to the front and flipping to the back and whatever. But I also often encourage people like, you can just get the book that just turn the page. It's actually not that hard, not that expensive either.
Yeah, the flipping of pages can get annoying. It kind of like disrupts the whole flow of the Psalms, but they are more based on like the day. So, for example, today with Thomas Aquinas, Doctor of the Church, we hear a lot from the Book of Wisdom and understanding, and he was a brilliant mind. So, like everything is kind of geared around that.
All coming mostly from the Psalms. Is that
so? The Psalms would be it's called the Comment of Pastors, and then the readings would be like from the Book of Wisdom because he's a doctor of the church and elevated, so you have more of the wisdom books. There's a small scripture reading from Wisdom. There's like intercessory prayers are more about a doctor of the church. The closing prayer will be about him. It's not just about today is Wednesday of second week of ordinary time at this point, the 3rd week. I've already lost where I am. Now, in community, you should be praying it because a lot of it doesn't make sense praying it by yourself. You're doing a lot of repetition, which kind of sounds ridiculous in your head once you start thinking about it. In like a community, they probably would just pray today is Wednesday because it is way too much flipping, and to tell people to flip on so many different pages. And doctors of the church are probably the most complicated ones, which is kind of funny because they're the educated saints that we look up to and emulate to. It's one of my favorites because I just like the flavor of of all the readings that day.
So it's different like every day.
The 4-week Psalter stays pretty much the same. It's just the readings at the end, the intercessory prayers, the prayer for the day is a little different. And sometimes they're themed.
It's kind of nice. Like it's like always like a little bit different.
Yeah.
Depending on some of the holidays, we have extra little paragraphs. There's an extra paragraph for Hanukkah. There's an extra paragraph for Purim during the high holiday season. Endings for some things change and that kind of stuff. But the core, regular day, the morning, you have the morning blessings, you have the psalm kind of reading, it's called Psukei Zimra. Then you have the Shema, you have the Amidah, you have like the concluding prayers, and then the psalm of the day, which is just every Sunday you say the psalm for Sunday, and every Monday the psalm for Monday. It's always the same.
The 4-week Psalter kind of makes it a little bit different. So it's also, you're not repeating for the most part. However, some days become, because of the ranking of the solemnity of the feast day, Sunday week 1 morning prayer almost gets annoying because you know it so well because it happens so often, especially after Easter.
Okay.
It just shows up for 8 days straight.
When I was in the seminary, I used to go to, this is a little controversial, but I'll tell you this anyways. So we had the main minyan, which happened in the synagogue room at the seminary, which was called Willis, which stood for the Women's League Seminary Synagogue.
Okay,
we called it Willis. But there were some of the old professors and, guys who had been around since before women were allowed in the seminary who liked to do mincha, the afternoon service, cut, dry, to the point, chick-chock, we got work to do, kind of way to do it. And they were like kind of old-fashioned. They wanted the way they'd been doing it for, a long time. So they met in a classroom on the other side of campus. That was the remnant of what was called the Stein minyan, because before it was Willis, there was the Stein synagogue. So the guys who missed Stein would go to the Stein minyan in like this dark classroom over on the other side of campus, and it was sort of like clandestine. But there was one professor that you would go, and whoever started off, because Mincha is a psalm, it's the Amidah prayer, and then it's the concluding,
So how long are we talking about?
For them, 8.5 minutes. I mean,
Okay.
You do a repetition of the Amidah if you have 10 people. So with that, so it took them 10 minutes tops, to do everything. And there was one guy, and he never opened the book. And he would say every word like out loud, quietly.
Okay.
And he would just do it. Well, yeah, because the guy's been doing it 3 times a day for 76 years.
I have to ask, was it sung or was it just read?
It has
like a sing-songy kind of melody?
It has a way it goes.
Because in a monastery, I find that the guys there at this one particular monastery I go to, some of the older ones do know it, but singing it, and there's a podcast I listen to, which is debatable depending on who you ask if that counts. If you sing it, I find that I memorize a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I was just curious.
There's a chanty tune that it goes with. He would just start, and he would do the whole thing from memory. But it's the shorter one, and the Amidah, you say it 3 times a day, and Ashrei, you say it 3 times a day, and Aleinu, you say 3 times a day, and it's like the same every day. So the thing is, like, when you do it all the time, you're saying, like, a lot of these things, not just 3 times, but you're also hearing it repeated in the morning and the afternoon if you have a minyan. So you're actually hearing it 5 times a day, and it gets very rote. From what you're saying, though, yours is much different every day.
There's 5 main hours. I guess I probably should start with this. So depending on, which set of rules you do, whatever, I'll just go off one monastery I go to. They do what's called the office of readings, 3:30 in the morning. Lay people, clergy, like living in a city, we do it when we wake up. Morning prayer will be after. They combine mass with it, which is a whole other thing. The daytime hours, so mid-morning, midday, mid-afternoon, it's usually pick one. Yes, you can do all of them, but those actually could repeat because there isn't a 4-week Psalter for it. Evening prayer, then night prayer before you go to bed.
Okay, so that's
morning
and
evening are called the cardinal hours because that's what the whole day hinges off of. And then my ordination into a deacon, those are the ones I'm required to do. On my own, yeah, I'd say about 8 minutes. That sounds about right. I've been to the most elaborate version of evening prayer. It was from the Sarum rite, which is not really an official rite of the church, but we're talking pre-Reformation England. So Vespers was over 2 hours.
Oof.
It was beautiful. But it probably took them a year to coordinate everybody together and the choir and the clergy, and there's all these different motions and everything. So it could be as simple as me sitting on the side of my bed or sitting on a subway train, when I was a kid with my phone or a small book, to a 2-hour cathedral celebration with smells, bells, organ, whole 9 yards. So it really can go the whole gamut. And the Shema that we were talking about, night prayer does have a different one every day. There's only a 1-week version of that. But there is an option if you want to memorize, like Sunday, essentially, you can pray that every day.
The evening service, is maybe between 15 and 20 minutes tops. By myself, I'd do it faster than that. But with a group, because you're doing everything, so maybe for 17 minutes, we'll call it 18 minutes, whatever. The morning service during the week, it depends. Monday and Thursday, you also read from the Torah. So you're adding a little bit of time there. That maybe takes an hour. Regular, maybe a half an hour. Shabbat, maybe 2.5 or 3 hours. There's so much extra. There's a whole extra service put in. Musaf is like a whole extra Amidah that's done. It's just a much longer service.
So Friday night you're here 2-3 hours?
No. Friday night, that one's maybe an hour, whatever. But Saturday morning, it's 2.5, 3 hours, whatever. Because we have that extra, we have a whole extra service basically Saturday morning. The rest of the week, though, it's pretty consistent. So one thing that we have that I was curious to find out from you, it is preferential to face Jerusalem while you pray for us. There is in the Mishnah a section that says that if a person cannot direct his face to Jerusalem, he should direct his heart. So, like, look, you can't actually turn towards Jerusalem. Maybe you don't actually know which way it is, like, whatever. Okay, you should kind of, like, have in mind that you're directing this towards Jerusalem. So, do you face Rome? Does it matter? If we're talking about prayer, of course, Islam, to face towards Mecca, very similar. I think I'm going to say this, maybe they got it from us a little bit, to face a particular direction, whatever. But is there a direction? If there's not, how do you orient yourself? What are you looking towards?
The question, is there a direction? Today, there is not. At one time in the early church, everything was supposed to face towards Jerusalem, towards the east, towards the rising sun. As Christ is the rising sun, the light of the world, that's why we face east. Like I said, the monastery I go to, I always forget what time of the year I've been there on retreat. The people face east at this point. The priest would face that direction. Long story, but yeah, the altar is freestanding. The priest is facing us now, but the people are facing east. And the light of the sun comes through the stained glass window over the altar, right at the high point of the Mass. When the Eucharist is consecrated. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's
I'd
nice.
say I kind of geek out over that. It's like, this is the exact reason why we're supposed to do this. They built this monastery.
Architecture, y'all do very well.
Yes. Yeah, we do pretty well. The architecture of Trappist, they're a reform of the Benedictine order. They have their own style of architecture, and they kind of embraced it up in Massachusetts. But they built the church for that reason. We don't face east, technically, for really anything. There's a spiritual east. There's all these different directions, especially the older Mass pre-Vatican II. You will have different directions, and everything was symbolic. We don't really have that anymore. Now, how do we orient ourselves before the prayer starts is coming from the Psalms. We start off, God come to our... Sorry, I'm saying this out loud as a group. God come to my assistance. Lord, make haste to help me. And then there's the glory be to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit at the end. The first prayer of the day, we start off with, Lord, open my lips. My mouth will proclaim your praise.
No, that's actually how you start.
Yes.
That's how we begin the Amidah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got it from you.
Wow.
And then usually it's Psalm 95.
Wow, it's like the exact same quote.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
And that's before the first hour of the day. So because I'm required to do morning prayer...
So you only say it once at the beginning.
The first hour. So if you're doing the office of readings first, you'd say it then, or you do it before morning prayer. And then it's Psalm 95. There's a couple of other options, but...
Okay, so we say that right before the Amidah every time.
That's literally the way we start it. And the rule of St. Benedict says to do it 3 times. There's no explanation. I've never seen a commentary on it. My thought was it's to wake you up.
To say that line 3
times?
Say
that line 3 times. It's not in the current version of the Liturgy of the Hours, but if you read the rule of St. Benedict, it says to do it 3 times. And the only reason I could think of is because you're waking up. You need to say it 3 times just to get yourself up out of the bed.
We have, so the prayers right before you go to bed. Not everyone does this, but there's a very old tradition. There are a few different lines at the end. It's like, say this one 3 times, say this one 7 times. Doing something 3 times can be very significant
some sort
for
of
us. So
doxology type thing, yeah. I just have to ask before we kind of wrap up, since we'll talk about night prayer. Our night prayer is all about death.
So we have a prayer that's kind of about death. Hashkivenu.
And you say that at night?
At night.
Yeah. Ours, so it's the Simeon's canticle when the Christ child is presented in the temple, the firstborn male, as we've kind of spoken about off camera, off microphone at one point. And it's, Lord, let your servant go in peace. Your word has been fulfilled. My own eyes have seen the salvation, the fulfillment of the prophecy that he wouldn't die until he sees the Messiah. That's consistent. There's a canticle at every morning, evening, and night prayer. That's always the same. Again, so the spirit of that hour.
There are little allusions, I guess, in the evening about fear of the night and these types of things. But there is an additional prayer called Hashkivenu, that lie us down in peace, O Lord, and rise us up again to life. And
well, I'm sure Simeon knew it. So
spread over us the sukkah of your peace.
I should look at the parallels to both of those. So much of what we do is obviously influenced, and the more we talk.
Well, and as we talked before, like the mutual influence, you know. I had a professor, Bert Vysotsky, who was very, very well read also in early church fathers. And he said, well, who do you think the early church fathers were reading? But then again, who do you think the rabbis were reading too?
Intellectual circles.
There weren't that many books around, you know.
That's true.
At a certain point, you got to read everybody. So they were all reading everything. They were reading the Greek philosophers. They were reading letters and books and things by each other because There wasn't that much. Amazon wasn't around yet. There were no podcasts to listen to. So,
Are there podcasts of your daily prayers? Because there are for the Liturgy of the Hours, and they usually come out the day before, or at least 12 hours before.
I mean, there are podcasts and recordings and things of people both explaining them and also recordings of people saying how to lead them.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like, oh, I'll listen to this podcast and fulfill my obligation, it doesn't really work that way.
Okay.
The requirement is you can pray either in a language you understand or in Hebrew. Even if you don't understand Hebrew, but you said all the words in Hebrew, that can count as having fulfilled your obligation.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
But if you're by yourself, it might be preferable to actually do it in a language you understand.
So in a communal setting.
If you're in a communal
right.
setting, Hebrew is preferable, even if you don't understand what's going on. But if you're by yourself, I think there's a lot of room to say that people should be praying in a language they understand. That said, anytime you translate from Hebrew into English, you increase the length by 30%. So it is much faster to do it in Hebrew, even though it takes longer to learn what it means. Once you know what it means in Hebrew, then
it kind of
it's
flies
much
by
faster.
a little. Yeah. The same thing with Latin. There was a priest I knew when I was a kid who, during Lent, which maybe will be coming out in a couple of weeks or a week or two after this podcast, he would pray the Liturgy of the Hours in Latin. I've acquired a book now over the years where it's parallel on each side of the page. There's like 2 columns with English and Latin. It's an older edition, so it's technically not the same rite. It does slow me down because it also gets rid of the repetition because I've been doing this for 25 years on and off. It kind of does get a little monotonous at times and distracting. And sometimes it takes me 8 minutes to pray morning prayer. Sometimes all of a sudden I notice it's 45 minutes later. I'm still sitting in a chair, one thought and something else. And the other downfall about using an app is, let me look that up. Oh, no, now my email, now Facebook, and now 20 minutes later, it's like I'm still halfway through the first psalm. I really got to finish this.
Right. Yeah.
So
I guess the last question that I'm kind of thinking of with this is, ultimately, what's the point? Like, what do you get out of it? You know, besides you promised that you would, and so you're trying to be a man of your word with it, you know. But
right.
Why should anyone who's not a deacon or a priest or a member of one of the orders, whatever, you know, why should a regular Joe Catholic pick up a book of the hours and do this?
It's a great question. I would love to answer. Essentially, post-Vatican II, the translation into the vernacular started happening. And when they rewrote the Liturgy of the Hours, it was primarily for anybody to have access to it. It wasn't just one book in a language that few understood, even those who were clergy. There was some lengthy readings, especially the officer readings, that you're just not going to get if you're not either very fluent in Latin or in the vernacular itself. And it was to encourage the laity, the non-ordained, the non-religious, to actually pray with the church, because it is a community. Like I said from the beginning, that's what initially turned me on to it, is I'm praying the same prayer as my pastor. Even though we're not together, spiritually we are. When I worked for the fire department, I would work overnights, and I would pray the Liturgy of the Hours at 3:30 in the morning, just like those monks were when I would go on retreat. We're not next to each other. That's my daytime, is their waking up time. But I would still get to pray the officer readings in an ER bay in my ambulance, and I was praying with them. It wasn't individual, even though I was by myself. I knew that there was someone else in the world praying the exact same thing.
So it gives a lot of unity.
Correct.
Solidarity.
The communal feel to the whole thing. And like in high school, I wound up developing a club for the Liturgy of the Hours almost. It was a bunch of, I think we had like 20 guys at one point praying after school, which was awesome. Like thinking about it now, it's like there's only 120 guys in the whole school. And we had that high percentage staying afterwards to pray midday prayer. And then once a week we prayed evening prayer or vespers because like, why not? We're all here. We could stay a little bit longer. Pastors are supposed to do it in their churches. There's a couple of churches around here that do. I actually found my spiritual director at a church because I popped in for Mass one day and they started doing morning prayer. And that was the first time they were doing it at Advent in 2016 or whatever it was. And it's like, oh, you're a Liturgy of the Hours guy. I can hang out here and, you know, you're one of us. You're doing what the church is telling you to do as the pastor, is put out the Liturgy of the Hours. And most places only do it a couple of times a year, but we can get into that when we get closer to Easter because there are certain days we're not allowed to have Mass. And usually places put the Liturgy of the Hours on. Yeah, but it's meant for all people.
I guess for me, There are two elements. One is the communal of having people actually together in a room. And then secondarily, there's the element of starting off the day, taking a break in the middle of the day, and like closing off the day and making it not about me. Because, I mean, let's face it, I could do without half an hour in the morning of doing these things, and like they're a pain. And on the one hand, too, you do things with a community, and it's like, I could do this so much faster by myself. And so there's always a struggle there. And also, what time are things done at? And if they're having a minyan, but that's the time that I'm trying to put my kid to bed, I'm going to have to miss that. So there are always challenges with it. But I think that putting the community in a high place of priority gets you out of this, what do they call this now? Like millennials have this problem, and then all the generations younger than us have this like horrible existential loneliness. There's this like incredible disconnection from humanity that is also coming in the age of connection, like whatever. We're the most connected anyone's ever been. You can talk to someone on the other side of the world instantaneously, but it feels very different when you're actually together in a room with other people. Like that's real community and that's real connection. You have to put other people in ahead of yourself, and that is difficult. And it's difficult for me, and I'm sure it's difficult for other people as well. But it also is about not starting off the day being about me. We can start off the day making it about God and about obligation to something bigger than us. And like start off the day thinking about something bigger than the individual kind of carries through the whole day. It makes your lens to the world about what are you putting into your head in the morning? And if what I'm putting into my head is that we're supposed to be like making the world a better place, and that's what I'm starting off my day with, that God is merciful and compassionate, and we should also be merciful and compassionate. And okay, so that's what I'm thinking about when I get up in the morning. I'm much more likely to try to do it then. So to me, there's a lot to be said there. I had a teacher at one point who said, when I daven, I talk to God. When I study the Torah, God talks to me. So it can also just be a very open experience. Some of the Talmudic rabbis said, if you prayed all the words in the book, but you didn't actually like pour out your heart to God, you didn't really pray. You kind of have to actually open up and be a little vulnerable and like say some personal kind of things in there. I think that's a really important thing to do too. It's very therapeutic also.
So the back of my iPad I actually had inscribed with what's called an antiphon. These sandwich the beginning and end of a psalm. And it's an obscure antiphon because you will so rarely say it, but it's because it's from like the Common of Pastors, and it says, "My life is at the service of the gospel. God has given me this gift of his grace." Today it might mean nothing to me, but over the years it has. And every time you pray it, day in and day out, it could be nothing, it could be something, but just being open to the word of God as you're reading it. Because the scriptures, they do become a little repetitive over times, but when you pray it when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 55, it's going to hit you differently at different points in your life. And that's when I teach scripture and how to pray with it. That's what I always tell the kids and the adults, when that happens. What are you doing today? Next year, you're going to have a completely different viewpoint. You're a different person. You're going to read the same scripture. You're like, I know this, but now it means something different. It's a different word, different passage, the emphasis, whatever, is going to hit you a little bit differently. So you never know. But yeah, like you were saying, just be open about it. And I've had 6th graders pray the Liturgy of the Hours in the middle of the day. I mean, I can pray it whenever I want. There's certain hours that are prescribed, but it's nice that I can just stop, open my phone, and there's a set of Psalms waiting for me.
It's, I think, centering. Time is very fluid now. And if you don't have things to kind of center you, like stop and take a breath, like your day can be going very poorly, but guess what? You still have to stop and daven mincha. And in doing that, there's a lot of that's about also thankfulness. Okay, well, look, take 8-10 minutes in your busy afternoon and recalibrate. You'll feel much better. So hopefully...
someone picks up a new book or puts on the app on their phone and do some more research.
Give it a shot.
Yeah,
See what
especially
happens.
with, a new time of year coming and, Pesach and Easter coming, it's coming up quicker than we think. It'll be here soon.
I'm going to say prayer. Try it sometime. You might even like it.
Right, exactly. I like that.
All right. Well, thanks, Anthony, for or Deacon Colin, we should say now, for the great insight. And I certainly learned a few things. And now I won't be starting off my Amidah without thinking about all the Catholics around the world who are saying the same words as me. That's absolutely incredible. So I think that'll take us out.
I think so, too.
Always a pleasure.
Same. Have a good night.
You can send us an email at friendscast@gmail.com. You can send us a voice memo on our Instagram, faithfulfriends_podcast.
We're on Facebook now. All of our stuff will be linked on the RSS webpage.
A big thanks to our producer, Evan Feist, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Rabbi. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Anthony. Maybe it's time to wrap it up a little bit.
Sure.